Hey friends, thanks for clicking on this video and joining in on what I hope is going to be a successful flute build. I know some of you are probably asking yourself, how does one man have such an array of talent, from beadwork to making knives, blacksmithing, now making flutes, bows, arrows, rawhide bags. Well, I just don't sit around and watch a lot of TV. On occasion I do, but a lot of times I try to keep myself busy. But over the course of my being a buckskinner for over 3 decades, I've just learned how to make this stuff. Powder horns, anything that has to do with the 1840 mountain man era. And part of that happens to be Indian love flutes. So just a short history as to how and why I elected to learn how to build these. Probably about, I'm guessing, 23 to 25 years ago. I've slept since then, so I don't remember the exact years. My wife had purchased me this flute made out of Alaskan yellow cedar. And it was an anniversary gift, because being at Mountain Man Rendezvous, especially back then, there was a lot of flute playing in camp. So I thought, I should learn how to play the flute. I'm already an accomplished drummer, so I kind of have a musical background, so to speak. So I thought I would learn how to build them. If I'm going to play them, I might as well learn to build them, and then I could sell some on my trade blanket. Now, there's quite a bit involved with making a flute, and as I go through this build, I'll try to remember to incorporate what terminology is and the reasons for and things like that. And I do want to thank my friend Jonathan. He made himself some cedar food boxes, grub boxes and things like that, and he left me his scraps, and lo and behold, there was 2 pieces in here that are going to be perfect for this build. So thank you, Jonathan. When it comes to flutes, there's a lot of different variety in them. For instance, this one is a G minor. And the wood of choice, or your choice of wood, will really give you a different resonating sound. Okay, now this is a light cedar, and this is a G minor. This is a 6-hole pentatonic scale. And if you can kind of hear, I'll show some differences with a couple other flutes that I have. Now obviously this one I didn't build. I did decorate it, but I did not build it, obviously. But if you can listen to the sound, this is a G minor. Okay. And every tuning hole, every thing has a specific length. If you change that length, you have one of 2 choices: either making a different flute in a different key or throwing it away. Okay, so this is a G minor. Now this is a G sharp. This was one that I had made out of Purple Heart years ago, and as the seams were drying, it split right back here in the slow air chamber, and it's like, well, I can't sell that. I didn't want to throw it away because Purple Heart's expensive, so I just filled it full of 5-minute epoxy. And this one here is probably, and this is a G sharp. You can hear it's a lot more peppy. It's a lot louder than the G minor. So that's the difference between the sharp and the minors. And even though they're still minor scale there is. Minor scale, I forget the terminology. It's been a while since I've made flutes, but some of you may have noticed that there's some holes up in the front of this flute. That's the G minor, and the G sharp doesn't have any. I kind of angled this one back. You have a slow air chamber and your sound tube right here, and right here you've got what they call a splitting edge. Okay. The true sound of this flute is determined the length of the front of the flute. So this is not the true front. This is not where the sound is developed. It's developed at these holes. Okay? So this flute doesn't have them, but when I put the two flutes together, kind of line them up a little bit, you can kind of see that the G sharp is ending where those holes are. So when you look at buying a flute, just to let you know, this is where the true sound of the flute is coming from. Okay? Now when you get into the big bore flutes, you're talking a whole different beast. This is 1 1/8 inch diameter. These flutes are a lot more difficult to play because the spacing of the tuning holes are much further apart, and the length of your slow air chamber from about here to the splitting edge is a lot longer. Okay? And this one is made out of mesquite. Okay? Now, but just listen to the difference. Now this one I may not be able to play as well because I got to keep everything so far away because of the length of the slow air chamber to the splitting edge. And this is in E. So you can hear the difference in the sounds. And because of the length, every flute, you can see if I put the back end of these two flutes together, you can see how much longer the E, the bass, the E is. I would say just looking at it right here, it's about maybe 2 1/4 inches longer, which actually puts it further away from your hands when you're trying to play it. And because it's a big bore flute, it requires more air to play these. So I don't play these at all. I really like my G sharp because it's just the right length, and the way the holes are placed, it's just perfect for my hands and fingers. And as I go through the build, if I can remember, I'll try to tell you what every step is along the way, because there's certain measurements. You know, I have a little chart here that I pulled off the internet that's got all of your measurements. Okay, and years ago, a buckskinning friend of mine gave me a book on how to make flutes. When I first started learning, I used this as my guideline, but then I found out that there was better measurements and things like that off of the internet. So that's what I use now. So anyhow, thanks for watching the introduction. I'm going to go and get these sized up, and I'll get them into my jig, and I'll go to routering the sound holes. So as you can see, some time ago I built myself a jig so that when I go to route the flute, everything is placed where it needs to be. And since I have not made a flute in quite a number of years, I thought I would practice first before routing the only pieces of Eastern red cedar that I have available. And if you're going to do this, and you want to start making flutes, I would strongly recommend making a jig. What I did is, when I was in the cabinet business, we did a remodel, and I took an old door off of a cabinet, and then I built what I needed for a jig. Now, these two pieces right here came off a scrap countertop, and then the sides came also from another door. Now, I'm trying to recall to memory everything. I have this particular jig marked back end B and back end A on this side. When I built this, my router, I also put a piece of plexiglass on that so that it just fits just inside. Okay. Now, within the first couple of flute builds, the center holes, the sound chamber and the slow air chamber, worked out perfect, but I had quite a bit of overlap on the edges. So one side stuck out more than the other, which required a lot more sanding. Okay, so what I did is I figured out which end needed to be where. So when I do this piece, which is I'm going to mark as A, it'll be held up to this end, and as you can see, I have it written right here. This is the A, and then I want to hold the router to this side when I go to routing out the chambers. And then the opposite would be the B end over here, and then I would hold the router to this side. So that way there, when I go to glue them up, there's a whole lot less sanding that I have to do. Now, that being said, the inside chambers, for whatever reason, ended up lining up fairly decent. But here's a caution. Okay, I'm going to try to shoot for 3/4 inch hole diameter, even though the routing bit I'm using is a little bit bigger. When you go to route this, do not take the depth all at once. Take a little bit, then come back, adjust your depth, and go a little bit deeper. But since this is a practice piece, I'll show you what I am referring to when I get to that point. I still have to lay out my marks on this piece of board right here, just so that I can get used to the router running in my hand and being able to stop at a certain point. So let me get this all marked out, and then I'll go and show what I'm talking about. And I will probably disconnect the sound when I get it into the editing chamber, because the router is going to be very, very loud. So here is the diagram for a G minor flute, and these are the measurements. And this is the slow air chamber, which is 4 inches long. Okay, and then you have a 3/8 wall right here, and this is where the airflow goes from here onto your splitting edge right there. So I have to have this 3/8 wall in there. So you can see I've got it laid out. This is the slow air chamber. This is where I need to stop the routing, and then this is where I need to start again. So I'm going to test and practice on this piece. Hopefully I'll get it. So this is why I want to practice. If this would have been my piece that I was going to make the flute out of, I'd have thrown it away already. It would have been garbage. So this is why I want to practice. But I'm going to take another pass so I can get this to the depth that I want. So practice number 2. I figured out that I needed to have this block in here to stop the router bit at this point. Now that might change just a little bit, just simply because that's 1 inch, and now I'm going to go down to 3/4 of an inch. So let me see if I can't get that accomplished with this new practice board. Well, mission accomplished. I'm just about right there. But I'm thinking that as I go deeper with the 3/4 inch bit, it's going to bring it right back to that line. Alright, let's see if I can't get that accomplished. Okay, on the test pieces I figured out what I really need to do. You can see I'm a little long on the slow air chamber, but that's okay because what you really want is 3/4 up top here, because you need to direct the air from the slow air chamber up through what's going to be a hole in here, and then over this 3/8 wall, and then into the slow air chamber with a splitting edge right here. But at this point, I'm going to show you the 2 halves. And like I said, the reason why I have hold the router to this side on one of the cuts and the other side for the other cut, because when I line up my holes, if I can hold everything together here, the 2 halves are just about lined up on the sides. Okay, so that's just less wood that I would have to remove. Now, as you can see, the hole is not perfectly round. I do that by design. I take a 3/4 inch dowel and some sandpaper, and then I'll clean the channels out. Okay, now I'm not going to do it completely on this piece because I think you kind of get the idea what I'm getting at. So by the time I get down to the bottom of the groove, I'm just whatever that thickness is on the sandpaper over 3/4 of an inch. So I think you can understand that. But this is the point right here that you want to really clean out your slow air chamber. And once you get that cleaned out and smoothed and looking the way it should be looking, I strongly recommend, and so does every other flute builder that I've come to know over the years, put a coat of waterproof glue on both sides of the slow air chamber. Okay, don't have to be very thick, but you just need to put a coat of glue in there, because as you're playing the flute, your hot moist, well, maybe it's a hot breath, but your moist breath will let water or condensation collect on the inside of the slow air chamber. And if that's not coated with some sort of waterproofing, then over time that water will begin to create problems with your playing. So that's really the only thing that you should do, is make sure this slow air chamber is coated with a waterproofing glue. This chamber right here, the sound chamber, that's not necessary at all. It's just not. So I'm going to go cut those real pieces that I want to play with and see if I can't get this. Stay tuned. Alright, I think I got it, but I had a little bit of an oops. My router bit vibrated down just a little bit, and when I put the 2 end pieces together, you can see it's just a little bit more oblong on the one end. It's not a big deal because I can take and I can sand, which is what I'm going to have to do anyway, sand this and make sure it's perfectly flat on both sides so that when I go to glue it up, it glues up really good. But if you take a look at where my lines are, I didn't go beyond them. So that's a plus. Not like I did on my practice pieces. So everything should line up really, really well. You could probably look at this piece here and see right in through here where my bit wobbled, and that's what caused it to go a little bit deeper. So like I said, it's not a big deal. So since this is aromatic cedar, this is going to sand out real easy. So I'm going to go ahead and spend some time sanding the slow air chamber, the sound chamber, smooth it all out, and then I'll go to gluing a coat of glue on the inside of the slow air chamber. Haven't seen a deer in about 2 months. So as I mentioned, I haven't been able to record any deer around here for a while, and if you looked real close you could see that the bale of alfalfa is just turning brown. In fact, at this point I've been giving a lot of it to my chickens. But it just so happened to be that I looked outside last night and there's that buck, and as soon as I grabbed the camera the dogs went to barking because they knew I was going to record something out in the front. So hopefully they'll start coming back. It's about the middle of September 2025 right now, and there is an archery elk and an archery deer hunt going on in the Manzanos right now. All right, so carrying on. If you're going to purchase a book on how to make flutes, let me get to the front page here to show you which one that I was introduced 2 years ago. It's a good book, but you have to be cautious, okay? If you notice on this page right here, I've got the tuning holes. I've got a note that says no good. And if you look real close, you can see that these measurements are for a B and an F. Okay? Now I will tell you that when you get over to the G minor, and if that's what you want to build, here's a photocopy of it. This diagram right here, this is to scale. I don't know if I can show you. Let me see if I can't maneuver this and show you. So there you can see this is to scale. And this is the only one, to the best of my knowledge, in that book that is 100% to scale. So having learned early on about those numbers not being 100%, what if you do make a mistake and you end up putting the tuning hole in the wrong spot? So this would be the hole for the slow air chamber, and this would eventually is going to be the tuning hole, the splitting edge. There we go. Well, if you can look real close, here's a very old flute. This is an F sharp, and if you look, I have a piece of wood glued on the edge to bring that fetish over to where it needed to be to blow an F sharp. So those are some little things you can do if you have an oh oops moment. And I've had this F sharp flute for God knows how long, just simply because all of the finishes wore off. It's been just laying around. I have a black walnut foot and a black walnut mouthpiece. It just looks like crap, but it still plays really well. It looks like crap, and I might just get rambunctious and refinish it. Make it look brand new again. I have that ability. Okay, and as you probably already noticed, I have the holes cut out and I have the slow air chambers sealed off with 5-minute epoxy. As I went to go use my Tight Bond 3, it was all dried. So I just decided to put 5-minute epoxy in it. I'll have to go get some glue, some proper wood glue to glue the pieces together. But this is a point that I want to mention something to you. Do your holes while the two halves are separate, because they're a lot easier to work from the top and from the inside. Now if you look at the diagram, you'll see that these edges are beveled. One comes beveled this way and the other one bevels the other way. And the instructions are telling you that it's a 35-degree angle. Well, if you don't know how to figure out a 35-degree angle, I mean, honestly, who really does? But since this is to scale, and if you drill everything where you need to drill it, you can easily measure from this wall right here back to the end of the angle, figure out what that measurement is, and then you can put a mark on the inside from the wall, from the wall to where you need to finish. And then you file that back to that line and you'll have your 35-degree angle. It's actually pretty easy, but it's a lot easier to do before you glue the two halves up. So I would strongly recommend you do that. And with the tuning hole, the splitting edge, I'm going to have to still think about that, just simply because when I do get it together, if I don't have it done, then it's much more difficult to get that 35-degree angle. But at the same time, because of the measurements, I do not want to go any further forward this way, because it will change what the root note is if I'm trying to shoot for a G minor. But there's something that I can do right now. If you notice, I've got a line from where the mouthpiece is going to be into the center of the slow air chamber. What my intention is to doing is, before I glue it up, is to file in a channel. It doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be pronounced, but I'm going to do that on both so that when I do glue it up, I've got a straight channel from the mouthpiece to the center of the slow air chamber. It's not necessary. No one's ever going to see it, but being the flute maker, this is what I strive for. Because when I go to, if you don't do that and you go to drill it out, you might drill a little bit of an angle, a little bit down, or whatever. This just helps you get a straight shot from the mouthpiece to the slow air chamber. So I'm going to work on that. Since I won't be able to get any glue for a few days, I can also at the same time make the fetish. And that's the piece of wood that directs the airflow from the slow air chamber over to the splitting edge. So I can do that, and you can see on these older flutes, that's what I've done, just something basic, something simple. But I've since started making birds and bird tails and some more decorative pieces. And this one, I haven't decided yet, so when I get that done, you'll see what I decided. So I'm going to go ahead and get that groove cut in it, and then decide what I want to move on to next. So we've come to the next step in the process, and that's laying out the roost. And what you really want when it comes to the roost, so you understand what we're talking about, you want your fetish to be above the flute holes, the tuning holes right here. And if you look at that, you can kind of see, it's not much, but it is perched a little higher than the tuning holes. Now on my flute here that's made out of Alaskan yellow cedar, it's flat all the way across. But this piece of brass that has the splitting edge, that's what sets it up above the tuning holes. So even though this is flat, it's still perched because of the little piece of brass. Okay? And in the meantime, I did refinish that F sharp flute, sanded it all down and put several coats of oil on it, true oil. But I did not get the fetish made for this flute yet, just simply because I ended up getting a custom order for a knife, and since the customer wants Purple Heart for the handle, I figured I would use Purple Heart for the fetish, and I won't be getting that for another week. But in the meantime, since it is all glued up, what you want to do is clean out the inside of the hole here with some sandpaper, just because, you know, when you glue it up, you get a little bit of run off with the glue, and some of it is in the inside. Now, while the glue was still wet, I did run a rag in there several times, but to ensure that I got it all, I'm going to run some sandpaper through it, and then I'm going to go ahead and get this turned around, and I'll leave the roost, and I'll put the playing hole in it, and we'll look at it at that point. So I've got the roost placed, but I've still got quite a bit more sanding to do. I need to fix the back end a little bit. I kind of walked a little bit with the drill bit, but I'm going to put a roost on it from a different flute and just see if it does blow and comes close to what I'm looking for. I don't have my scale here, obviously, to see what note it's blowing now as far as the root note, but this should tell me if I can be able to produce a flute out of it. And I don't even have a splitting edge on it yet. So I think it's gonna work. Alright, get back to work. Okay, I've done all the sanding that I'm gonna do for today. I do have the splitting edge filed in. I don't know how well the camera can pick it up, but you can see that the bevel goes in, and when your breath goes across it, it splits it pretty much like a whistle is what it really is. But now comes the time to see what key, potentially, if I were to leave it like this, what key it would play in. So I have my little digital scale here, and let me see if you can see it in the camera. Looks like it's pretty close to an F. You can overblow it pretty easy. So, if I were to leave this flute just like this, I could just shorten this just a little bit until I get that perfect F pitch. But I'm shooting for a G minor. So, I'm going to pause right here, get some measurements made, get them marked out, and then I'll show you how I burn the tuning holes in and why you would want them burnt in as opposed to just drilled in. Stay tuned. Well, I've reached the point of the day that I'm going to start tuning this flute. Okay, and like this G minor flute, I'm going to bore holes in it because this is where the true sound of the flute comes out. Not here, but right here, okay, where these holes are. Now I know previously I said don't drill them in, you want to burn them in. To get started, it's okay to drill them in. What you'll want to do is to start with a smaller hole and then enlarge it by burning it in. So I'm going to start off with a smaller drill bit, put the fetish on top and see where it's blowing, and then at that point I'll start burning them in. Now for me, the easiest way to burn them in is years ago when I was building a lot of flutes, I bought a junk drill bit set. And I drilled them into a piece of wood, epoxied them in, and then what I do is I take a torch and I get this end red hot, and then I burn it through the flute. Burning the holes in as opposed to just drilling them in, I'm given to understand, and everybody that makes flutes for any length of period of time will tell you that burning the hole in stabilizes the flute a little bit more. Now if for some reason you're doing this and you don't get your holes quite right, now I did not build this drone flute. Somebody gave it to me, and they couldn't learn to play it. But if you look where he put the tuning holes on the bottom, they're not perfectly symmetrical. You can see that. But at the same time, you can look at the flute holes. They never even bothered to round them off. So this flute is not a very good flute. It's in the key of F sharp, and it is difficult to play. For one thing, you know, the holes in the back are just a little bit too small. But, you know, being a flute maker myself, I can kind of point these things out and work around them. And if you're not familiar with how a drone flute plays, both flutes, even though they're together, there's still two flutes, you play both of them at the same time. Both flutes are in the key of F sharp. So when you cover the playing holes and blow into both sides, you can't hear the difference between the two flutes. Let me demonstrate. You really can't hear a discernible difference. Now when I go to play, then you'll hear, as I'm playing the notes, the F sharp is going to remain, and then you get that haunting drone sound. Unfortunately, I don't have the air to keep playing this thing. I just don't. I have enough air to play a single flute, but you can kind of get the idea. If I drill those holes precisely on the marks, I may miss the root note. So what you want to do is be just a little bit forward of that, and then burn your holes to that point. And if it's off just a little bit, then just go to the next size hole, and then you'll be able to get this tuned in. So I'm going to go ahead and start doing this, and we'll see how it turns out. Stay tuned. If you tune these flutes, say like at 80 degrees, or if you start at 80 degrees like it is right here, right now in my shop, I should continue tuning this flute at about 80 degrees, because at 80 degrees, that is the best this flute will ever play. If it gets a little warmer, the pitch will be a little higher, a little colder, it'll be a little lower. But unless you have an ear that's tuned for these differences, anybody listening to you won't have a clue that it's a little higher or a little lower in pitch. So just a note. So I'm going to go ahead and start burning the holes through. It's going to take some time because it's, you know, it's pretty thick. So when I get that accomplished and I get this root note set, I'll turn the camera back on, take my pitch pipe, and I'll show you. Well, as you can see, they're burned in, but before I go to check to see if I hit that root note, I'm going to let it cool down for a little bit. And as you can see, I'm not perfect. I kind of tilted my hand a little bit when I burnt that one in. But hopefully, because of my experience, I can pretty much tell you I'm going to have to enlarge these holes just a little bit so I can compensate for that. I hope. Okay, I've burned another set of holes in it, and I'm going back with it. So I want you to see what she's blowing now. I'm in the G range. I'm getting there. Okay, I'm going to continue on. Okay, I'm getting close. Now, I have a decision to make, because if you look at real close, you can still see some filing work that I need to do with the gap before it gets to the splitting edge. And I purposely left that short so that I can tune this in conjunction with my holes. Okay. Now, when I take and move the fetish just a little bit closer, I'm still hitting that G note, and it's kind of hard to do this holding the pitch pipe and moving the fetish back and forth. But you can hear how that's changing as I move it back and forth, and I'm watching the pitch pipe to see where the best sound is. Which is just about right there, and you can see I can do a little bit more filing. And it's not necessary to do this, but like when you sell a flute to somebody and you talk about flutes, you want to tell them to make sure that when they line everything up, the hole lines up perfectly with the edge of the fetish. And I don't know how well this is picking it up in the camera, but you can kind of see everything lines up perfectly, and you get the best sound right there when the fetish is lined up perfectly. And watching what I'm doing and watching my pitch pipe, I can see that I still got to take a little bit off of that edge right there. So I'm going to work at that, and I've got the next drill bit set out for my next series of hole burnings. So I'm going to try to get this accomplished, and then we'll see what she sounds like at that point. Just short of the E. I think that's what it was. I'm just short of that needle resting right on the E. But I think I'm going to leave it right there for now and come out in the morning when it's much cooler and then blow a note and see if I'm still getting close to that root note. Wait a tick. Before I go, I just kind of want to show you what I was talking about. Start forward of your mark and then work back to it. I left the pencil mark on the bottom of the flute so that you can see that the hole is now past the pencil mark, just the edge of the hole, and that's where, you know, at this edge of the hole is where the true note is resonating from. But if you look at that, you can see that I'm actually past my mark. Well, as you can tell, I have the overhead light on. It's a heavy, heavy overcast this morning. And because of that and because of the light, I have to record a different angle. Because I'm hoping that you can see the electronic pitch pipe when I get to that point. It's 8 o'clock in the morning right now, and it's 60 degrees in the shop right now. But I want to show you what further I did with the flute after I shut the camera off yesterday. It's not much. The instructions suggest that your air hole right here should be about 5/16. And I went ahead and filed that back so that I'm just short of that 5/16 right now, because you don't want to overdo it. But at the same time, I went ahead and opened up the root note holes right here to the next size, which was only a 64th. It wasn't much, but in combination with opening these holes just a touch and filing this back just a touch more, I was able to blow a perfect G minor. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for the time being, because as far as I'm concerned, it's perfect. But I also want to demonstrate the importance of making sure that when you do all of your playing holes, that the flute is at the same temperature that you did your root note. Because when I did all of this, it was 80 degrees in the shop. Right now it's 60, and let's see what it blows right now, showing the importance of tuning this all at once, and with the wood the same temperature consistently. As you can see, I'm not blowing the perfect G minor. I'm just short of it. Okay, now if I were to go ahead and do the final tuning on this flute, it would sound off because this was tuned at 80 degrees. So what I'm going to do is set this aside for now. I have a few other things to do. It's supposed to be 77 degrees later this afternoon, but I'm going to go ahead and get everything laid out, and I'm going to go ahead and start the tuning process. But I'm going to fall short of hitting that perfect note, because when it reaches 80 degrees, that's when I want to burn my final hole, the playing holes into the flute, so that the wood is expanded to the same expansion that it was when I burned these in. And I hope that makes sense as to what I'm explaining, because wood does contract and expand a little bit with your ambient temperatures. Now, before I do all of this, some flutes I make have large playing holes and some have small. A lot of that is determined in where you place, where you burn those holes. And I already sanded that off on the bottom, but I showed you yesterday where the hole actually was. And a lot of people ask me, wow, why are your playing holes so big? Well, that's simply because when you're playing the flute, it's a lot easier to get a half a note on a larger hole. Okay? The flutes that have really small holes in them, it's extremely difficult to get a half a note. But when the holes are about this size, or maybe a little bit smaller, it's real easy just to roll your finger a little bit and get a half a note. So that's why I tend to put a little larger playing holes than what most flute builders do. Again, having an ear for music, being an accomplished drummer, I appreciate the value of a half a note than, say, what the average person picking a flute up off a table and just wanting to play around a campfire. So I'm going to set this aside. I have a couple other things I got to do first, and then I'm going to go ahead and lay it out and start burning the holes and probably at this point, because this video is getting to be long enough already, I went through yesterday afternoon and edited out some stuff that I didn't think was necessary at this point. But I think the next time you see the flute, it'll be completely done. I'll have the Purple Heart fetish up here, and I'll cut my oops off and glue on a piece of Purple Heart and blend all that in. So I guess we'll see you when all of that is accomplished. So as I mentioned previously, next time you see the flute, it'll be complete. And there it is. I will go ahead and give you a couple different angles so you can see the wood as it's sealed, because I do have it sealed right now with 4 coats of True Oil. There's a side view of it with the bird, and the bird is Purple Heart, but I did not polish it as much as I did the mouthpiece. I just kind of wanted to leave that a little dull. That's just my personal preference. And there's the view from the other side. Let me focus in on the bird a little bit, and you can see that I also put beads for the eye, and I put some red beads in the tail. I got 2 on each side, and I have 3 going on the top of it. Let me show you that real quick. And there you have the 3 beads on the top side of the tail. Okay. Let me show you real quickly how you can play this and fool all your friends into being a very well accomplished flute player. So when it comes to the Native American Indian love flute, there's just simply not a whole lot of music written for these things because they're in minor keys. And second of all, you just learn to play these the way you feel. Okay? Now, since this is a 6-hole flute, it's a 6-hole pentatonic scale flute, one of the things that you have to bear in mind when it comes to hole number 3, right here, and then the hole above it, you have to play it with either one of these holes plugged. Okay? If that doesn't work for you, then what you can do is you take a piece of leather and wrap it around the hole, and then just tie it real tight, and then you don't even have to bother with that playing hole. But when it comes to some of the techniques, as I mentioned previously, it's very simple. If you can take your tongue and on the top of the roof of your mouth, anything like that, then you can transfer that into the flute, and you can make different sounds. And if you can vibrate your voice like that, you can also transfer that into the flute. Let me demonstrate. All I'm doing is just clicking my tongue off the roof of my mouth. That's all I'm doing. And here comes the vibration. There again, that was a combination of vibrating through the flute and my tongue, clicking off the top of the roof of my mouth. And there's plenty of progressive scales online that can kind of show you some finger playing, but there again, let me demonstrate what I was talking about, either leaving the 3rd or 4th hole closed or open. And when your fingers get used to holding the holes closed, then it'll be a lot easier to play. For me, I get arthritis in my hands, and sometimes it's real hard for me to keep my fingers closed tightly on those holes. And just to reiterate, I did put small holes in this particular flute because I plan on selling it. And not everybody that purchases one of these is going to care about playing a half note. But let me demonstrate. So you can hear how nice that melody sounds by having this one hole closed. Now I'm going to go in the opposite direction, and I'm going to leave, let's see here, I'm going to leave that hole open and play, and then close the one above it, if I get the fingering right. Let me see if I can get this into the camera here. I'll do that again so you can see the fingering with the other hole opened. Okay, now listen to what happens when both holes become opened. I think you can readily hear the difference. Whoops, I messed up. Hear how off key it sounded? That's why you have to play these with one or the other hole closed. It just doesn't sound right. And that's what they call the dove coat, whatever that is. But with just a little bit of practice, you can really fool people around a campfire into making them think you know how to play this. And of course, you know, as I mentioned previously, you know, I've been a drummer most of my life, so I have an ear for music, so I can hear the progression of keys and notes, and a lot of it is timing. If you just learn to time what you're playing. Just mix up the timing and it sounds really good. Whoops. I got a finger on a hole wrong. Okay, that's the end of the demonstration. I want to thank everybody for following along, and I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up and share it with your bestest of buds. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.